Tenali Raman and the Stolen Wells. One year in the kingdom of Vijayanagar, the monsoon season was poor. The king ordered one of his ministers to dig fresh wells all over the kingdom so that his people would not suffer during the hot summer season. A lot of money was given to the minister for this important job. After a few weeks, the minister reported back to the king, "Your Majesty, wells have been dug all across the land just as you ordered." The king went around the city with the minister to inspect the wells himself. He was pleased to see that they were well made and full of water. However, during summer, some villagers came to the capital desperate to meet the king. But no one would let these poor people into the palace. Finally, they decided to meet Tenali Raman and ask him for help. The villagers told Raman that they had no water in their village. They said, "We complained to the minister, but in vain. We want to meet the king, but the palace guards won't let us in." When Raman asked about the wells that the minister had built, they replied sadly, "There is no sign of any well in our village." Raman promised to help them. The next day in court, Raman told the king that there had been a theft of wells in a village. The king didn't believe him. So Raman said, "The villagers themselves are waiting outside. Ask them." The villagers were brought before the king. One of them bowed and said, "Your Majesty, we have come all the way to tell you that the wells made by the minister have disappeared. Now we are suffering without water. Please come and see for yourself." The king agreed and went to the village along with the minister and Raman. Sure enough, there were no wells to be seen. Then the king went around his kingdom and was angry to find that wells had been dug only in the capital city and the surrounding villages. The villages further away had been left without a single well. The king understood that the cunning minister had taken some of the money for himself instead of using it for digging wells. He immediately ordered the minister to build 100 wells in the villages far away with his own money. Raman supervised the work and got it completed quickly. All the villagers thanked him for his help. Tenali Raman and the Special Meal. King Krishnadeva Raya of Vijayanagar was very proud of his lovely garden. In this garden, there were many unique fruits, vegetables, and flowers, including a very special eggplant. One day, the king invited all his ministers to taste the delicious eggplant. Tenali Raman especially enjoyed it. He went back home and told his wife about the dish. She too wanted to taste the vegetable and begged him to get some for her. Raman refused and said, "The king will punish anybody who is caught stealing from his garden." But since she continued to bother him, he finally agreed. That night, he crept into the garden and plucked a few eggplants for his wife. Once she had cooked them, she too agreed that they were delicious. "We must give some to our son," she said. Raman warned her not to do so. "If he tells somebody, we'll be in trouble," he said. But his wife didn't listen. He then had an idea. Raman went up to the terrace where the boy was sleeping and poured a bucket of water over him. When the boy woke up, he cried, "Go inside, it's raining." Once the boy tried himself inside, they gave him the eggplant to eat. He too enjoyed it a lot and happily went to sleep. The next morning, the king's gardener reported to the king that some eggplants were missing. The king was very angry. He agreed with his minister, who said, "The only person clever and brave enough to steal from the king is Raman." The king decided that the only way to find out the truth would be to question Raman's son. So Raman and his son were brought to court. The king asked the boy sternly, "What did you eat last night?" The boy answered, "Why, eggplant. It was the nicest vegetable I had ever tasted." The minister was pleased. "That proves it. Raman is the thief," he cried. However, Raman was calm. He said, "The boy was dreaming last night and he kept thinking of eggplants and rain in his sleep. Ask him about the weather last night if you don't believe me." When asked, the boy innocently replied, "I'm sure it was raining heavily last night. I got wet because I was sleeping on the terrace." Since the weather had been perfectly dry the previous day, everybody was convinced that the boy had been dreaming. Raman was let off thanks to his intelligence. Tenali Raman's gift. It was the festive season in the beautiful kingdom of Vijayanagar. All the people danced, sang, and celebrated. The kind king, Krishnadeva Raya, too wanted to share in the happiness. He decided to join in the festivities by giving all his courtiers expensive gifts. That evening, he placed many wonderful gifts, gold and jewels on the center table of the royal hall. He called his courtiers and said, "Come and pick whatever you like." The courtiers' eyes shone with delight. They rushed to collect their riches and merrily chose what they wanted. Just then, the king's clever court jester, Tenali Raman, entered the hall. He saw the crowd and waited quietly at the door, wondering what the rush was about. On his way out, one of the courtiers told Raman all that had happened and informed him that his share of gifts was on the table. But Raman saw that there was just one empty silver plate left for him. He calmly walked up to the table, took the plate, and covered it with his silk scarf. Everybody was surprised. Curious, the king asked him the reason for his strange action. Raman replied, "I just wanted to save your name." "And how can you do that?" asked the king, more surprised. "Well, if I walk back home carrying an empty plate, people will think that their king is not rich enough. But if I cover it, they will think there's something inside," explained Raman. The king was pleased. He said, "Raman, you are right in protecting my name and honor. Now bring that plate here." Raman did as he was told. When he reached the king's throne, they took his precious pearl necklace and placed it on the plate. "There, now the plate is no longer empty," he said with a smile. So once again, Tenali Raman's wit came to his aid, and he was rewarded with the most expensive gift of all. Tenali Raman and the Proud Priest. Subhashastri was a learned priest at King Krishnadevaraya's palace. However, he was very proud and thought that he was better than everybody else. He was jealous of the clever Tenali Raman and always tried to insult him. At first, Raman ignored him. But when he couldn't stand it any longer, he waited for a chance to teach the vain priest a lesson. One day, the king bought some fine Persian horses for his army. Seeing Raman standing nearby, the king gave him one horse and ordered him to take good care of it. Tenali Raman gladly accepted the horse. He decided that this was his chance to teach Subhashastri a lesson and made his plans. Raman built a special stable for the horse. The stable was covered from all sides and had just one small window. Once a day, he fed the horse just one bundle of hay through this window. So the poor horse remained hungry most of the time and would just wait to grab the hay. A month later, the king asked to see his Persian horses. He was pleased to find that all of them were strong and well trained. Just then, Subhashastri asked, "But where are Raman and his horse?" Immediately, a guard was sent to fetch them both. Raman quickly came to the king and said, "Your Majesty, the horse is very stubborn and will not obey me." "I request you to send Subhashastri with me to the stable to help me, since he is clever and knows so much about everything." Subhashastri was thrilled and boasted, "Yes, I know the science of horses and can easily bring it here." So he went with Tenali Raman to the stable. Once they reached the stable, Subhashastri said, "Stay away, Raman. This is no job for an ordinary jester." He put his head through the tiny window to take a look at the horse. The hungry horse, thinking that the priest's long white beard was hay, bit it hard and would not let go. Poor Subhas. He was in pain and started screaming for help. Raman and a few others broke the stable. The horse, still holding Subhashastri's beard in its mouth, came out. They all walked back to the king. When they reached the court, everybody, including the king, burst out laughing. However, the king soon asked what was Raman's trick. He scolded him and told him to apologize to the priest. But Subhash Shastri had learnt his lesson. Before Raman replied, he said, "No, it was my fault. I have always humiliated him, but until now he has kept quiet." He apologized to Raman and was never mean to anybody again. Tenali Raman and the Proud King. Over the years, King Krishnadevaraya had won many wars and defeated powerful enemies. So, he had become rather proud of himself. One day he asked Tenali Raman, "Don't you think I'm a great king? Not only am I wealthy and loved, but everybody also respects and fears me. There is no one above me." Raman replied, "True, Your Majesty, but even your greatness and power can change with situations." This angered the king, so Raman humbly continued, "I don't mean to disrespect you, but there may come a time when a person may physically mistreat you and you may not complain." The king turned red with anger and ordered Raman to prove this to him. "Or else I'll punish you," he thundered. Raman requested for some time and went away. The king, however, soon forgot their argument. Then one day the king, who was with his queen, sent for Raman on some official work. Raman walked in with the cute baby girl in his arms. The queen immediately started cuddling the little girl and playing with her. Even when the baby wet her dress, she just laughed, changed her clothes, and continued to fuss over her. The king, Raman, and the maids all looked on, enjoying the scene. Soon, the king too wanted to play with the little girl. As soon as he took her in his arms, the little one, amused with the king's mustache, began tugging at it. But the king did not mind one bit. When the baby drooled over the king's clothes, he simply wiped it off. After a while, the king suddenly remembered why he had caught Raman and felt ashamed for having forgotten his duty because of a baby. He gruffly asked Raman, "Whose child is this? Why have you brought her here?" "She is my neighbor's child," Raman replied, "and I brought her here to prove my point." The surprised king asked, "What point can you prove with this cute little child?" "That you are not as powerful as you claim to be," answered Tenali Raman. "The baby just dirtied the queen's clothes, your clothes, and pulled your mustache. Yet you did not punish her." He saw the king's embarrassment and continued, You even neglected your duty as a king because of the baby. Do you see how power changes with situations? King Krishnadeva Raya agreed with Raman and thanked him for reminding him that there was somebody else more powerful than all, God. Tenali Raman outwits the thieves. Once there was a gang of cunning thieves in Vijayanagar. King Krishnadeva Raya and his soldiers tried their best to catch them, but they always escaped. Now the thieves knew that Tenali Raman was the king's favorite and that he had got many costly gifts from him. So they decided to rob him. One evening, they quietly crept into his garden and hid behind the bushes. Luckily, Raman, who was on the terrace, saw them. He quickly came up with a plan to catch the thieves. He came down, stood near an open window, and loudly shouted to his wife, "There are thieves in town, so we must be careful. Let's put all our wealth in this big trunk and hide it." Raman and his wife then filled the box with big stones, dragged it into the garden, and dropped it into the well. The trunk fell in with a great splash. The thieves watched and listened with glee. At midnight, when they thought everyone was fast asleep, they walked to the well. Seeing the deep water, they began drawing it up and throwing it out. By then, Raman had quietly come out and was hiding nearby. While the thieves were around the well, Raman went to the garden shed, took a shovel, and made a path for the water to flow into the garden. Now the plants were getting watered by the thieves. Clever Tenali Raman. In the meantime, he also sent his son to the palace with an urgent message to send the soldiers. After a lot of hard work, the thieves finally managed to pull out the trunk. However, when they opened it, they were shocked to see that it was only filled with stones. Just then, the soldiers surrounded them and arrested them. They were soon sent to prison. Pleased with Tenali Raman, the king rewarded him for his intelligence and bravery. Everybody praised Tenali Raman, and the story of the thieves who were made to work so hard was told all across the land for many years. Tenali Raman and the Learned Man. One day, a man who could speak many languages fluently came to King Krishnadevaraya's court. He asked the king for permission to show his talent and be tested by the courtiers. The courtiers spoke to him in their different languages. To their amazement, he could easily reply in every language. Finally, he said, "I challenge the court to find out what my mother tongue is." Each courtier began to try. One spoke to him in Hindi and claimed that this man's mother tongue was Hindi. Another courtier cried, his mother tongue must be Tamil. And so it went on. But the man spoke all the languages so well that nobody guessed correctly. Soon the man too got tired. He said to the king, "I will give your court just one more guess, and if it is wrong, you must give me whatever I ask for." The king turned to Tenali Raman for help. Raman agreed and promised to find out the learned man's mother tongue by next morning. That evening, Raman treated the man like a royal guest and made sure he was given a delicious dinner. Feeling satisfied after the heavy meal, the man soon fell into a deep sleep. Raman waited outside his guest room until he heard him snoring. He then quietly entered the room, tickled the sleeping man's face with a broom, and quickly hid behind the bed. At once the man woke up shouting, but since he didn't see anybody in the room, he went back to sleep. The next morning at the court, the learned man asked Raman if he could give him the correct answer. "Yes, sir," replied Raman. "Your mother tongue is Gujarati." The man was shocked. He said, "You're right, but how did you ever guess?" "Well, sir, I am not as learned as you," said Raman, "but I know that every person speaks their mother tongue naturally, especially in pain or in fright. So I did a test last night." He explained to the court how the previous night the man had shouted out in his own mother tongue, Gujarati, when he was frightened in his sleep. The man was surprised, but he was also pleased with Raman's intelligence. "You are indeed a genius, Raman," he said, and congratulated him. Tenali Raman and the Greedy Brahmins. King Krishnadevaraya's mother was on her deathbed. Her last wish was to give away mangoes to the Brahmins. But since it was not the mango season, the king couldn't find any, and his mother died without fulfilling her last wish. The king was very sad and disturbed by this. He decided to ask a Brahmin for advice. This Brahmin was very greedy. He at once saw his chance to make some money. He put on a serious face and said, "Your Majesty, your mother's soul will not rest in peace until you give pure gold mangoes to the Brahmins." King Krishnadevaraya was a religious man, so he believed the Brahmin. He made gold mangoes and gave them to the Brahmins along with other expensive gifts. The pleased Brahmins praised the king and assured him that his mother's soul would now rest in heaven. However, Tenali Raman saw the Brahmins' greed and the way they misused religion. He decided to teach them a lesson. He went to the Brahmins and said, "Today is my mother's death anniversary. Will you please come home and perform the rites?" The Brahmins hoped to get more riches from Raman, and so they readily agreed. At the house, as the Brahmins waited, Raman lit a fire and heated some long iron rods in it, turning them over and over again. The religious men finally got impatient. They asked him, "Why have you called us here when you are not even preparing for the ceremony?" "But these rods are for the ritual," Raman answered. He explained to the confused men, "My mother suffered from arthritis. Just before she died, she asked me for a hot iron rod to help reduce the pain. But sadly, she died without fulfilling her last wish." He continued, "Just like you helped our king, you can help me set my mother's soul at rest too. As soon as the rods are hot enough, I'll put them on your bodies." The scared Brahmins understood what he was trying to tell them. Ashamed of their greed, they asked Tenali Raman to forgive them and promised to return the gold mangoes to the king the very next day. Tenali Raman and the ambitious Barber. The royal barber in the kingdom of Vijayanagar was an expert at his job. However, He was very dissatisfied with his work and always hoped to do something different. Some of the courtiers in the king's court heard the barber's complaints. They decided that this was their chance to get rid of the clever Tenali Raman, whom they were very jealous of. They went to him and asked, "Barber, don't you want to do something other than cut people's hair? Why are you wasting your life like this?" The barber sighed and said, "I wish I could, but I have no other skills." "Don't be silly. You don't need any skills," the cunning courtiers said. "Look at our Tenali Raman. All he does is tell the king funny stories and jokes and make him laugh. You are more intelligent than him. You would make a better jester." The barber thought about it and agreed. The next day, upon the urging of his new friends, the barber requested the king to give him Tenali Raman's post. The king saw the barber's foolishness but decided to let him learn his lesson. He said, "Okay, but remember, if you don't do a good job, I will send you away." From the very next day, the barber took Tenali Raman's seat. Raman, who saw him sitting there, bowed to the king and went away without a word. The courtiers were very happy to see him leave. However, the barber wasn't funny at all. He tried to crack jokes and amuse the king but failed miserably. By the end of the day, he was feeling very ashamed. The barber was walking back sorrowfully to his house when he saw Tenali Raman on the way. Raman was busy scrubbing a black dog on the road. He was surprised at the sight and asked Raman what he was doing. Tenali Raman replied, "I don't like the black color of this dog, so I'm washing it with soap until it becomes white." The barber laughed and said, "How can you change the color of a dog?" Raman replied, "Why not? If a master in his profession can do something else he's not even good at, I can surely change the dog's color." The barber understood what Tenali Raman was trying to tell him. He apologized to the wise jester. The next day, he went to the king and requested to have his old job back. The king happily agreed. Raman was welcomed back to the court and rewarded for his wit. Much to the dismay of the courtiers, Tenali Raman again became the king's favorite.